state of the road in the Phoenix Park, which was as good then as it is now, 50 years ago. We had carried they called a mechanic. As a matter of fact, it was necessary because he had to pump the petrol up. There were no electric pumps then. Only the mechanic and the driver were allowed to do any work on the car. The surface was half the distance. It was 4 miles then, because we went right down to the police depot and the Gough Monument.
Chevron B48 is a Formula 2 car built for worldwide Formula 2 racing, but it's being converted to Formula Atlantic just for this one race. The car basically is geared for 160 miles an hour for this track. It's got a 6-speed gearbox. It's a monocoque specially made for racing. It's quite sometimes a horrific type of viewpoint, particularly approaching at a speed of about 160 miles an hour. You're obviously in 5th gear and you've got to go from 5th all the way back down to 2nd in a matter of fractions of a second, braking pretty hard at the same time and making sure that you keep the car in a straight line, because that's where you get your maximum braking area from. Pick third and just make sure that you get the apex of the corner absolutely right, drift across and foot to the floor, 2nd gear with the power on actually before you get around the corner, because obviously the quicker you come out of the corner, the quicker you go down the straight, and that's vital down the back section, down towards Rattler Corner, because in actual fact the road falls away, and although it's much narrower and bumpier, it certainly is the fastest part of the track, and it's, you know, pretty hazardous, and there's not much passing done down there, but it's ultra fast, hence we use very little downforce on the car to get the maximum speed out of it as possible. The same applies to Rattler. It's even, you know, hairier insofar as that you are coming into it at just over 160. You've got to brake really hard, and this time it's so tight that you've actually got to select 1st gear. That's a problem, obviously, for the race, because it's very tough on drive shafts and gearboxes, because of, obviously, of, you know, 220 brake horsepower each time, coming flat on 1st all the time, and then through the gears up to 5th. Brake hard for Dublin Corner. And you've got the same problem again, except 2nd gear. But this is the one place that you've got to be so careful of taking the corner to make sure that you actually come apex properly and come down the straight at its absolute maximum output. And that's the whole secret. Really, here there's not a lot of corners, but it's very, you know, it's quite technical insofar as that you've got to have a lot of nerve and a lot of sort of precision to be able to maximize on the proper outlet of the power.
Problem, really. I mean, we start off basically on Friday night with a collection of public roads, and we've got to turn them into what you can see now, a racing circuit. It takes something like hundreds of tyres and scaffolding and a few straw bales and a lot of crowd control barrier to virtually keep the public off the roads and to keep the competitors out of amongst the public. There's something like about 300 marshals here today, all unpaid. The actual construction of the circuit will start roughly about the Monday before the event, and it just gradually takes place. You'll find JCBs climbing all over the place, and blokes hammering in stakes, a bridge to be erected. You know, the logistics of the thing are quite phenomenal, and there's nowhere else in Europe that they have this sort of a problem.
Cars are production cars, which are basically what the man on the street drives, and we're not allowed any change of gear ratio. The standard cars with 2 modifications basically. Their exhaust is free, and shock absorbers, which just help the handling the car a little better. Other than that, they're standard cars.
The truth of the river, this is your wife's shopping car.
Oh yes, she's Monday to Friday, and I'm Saturday and Sunday, whatever event will be on, Hilltime or Mondello or the Park in this case, this weekend.
Now, if anybody should know their way around this circuit, you should. I believe you've been around 21 times, is it, in races?
21 times in the park in motor cars, and twice on motorbikes before that. So I suppose I should know that.
Does all the special knowledge give you an advantage, do you think, over?
No, not really. All these up-and-coming young lads there are able to learn it very quickly.
How's your big moment?
How's it going?
Very good, fantastic. As long as the day is good.
How's the car going?
Fantastic car. I mean, it's only a 900cc 3-cylinder. And so I got a bit of work to do to keep up with those 3-litre cars and things like that.
Now, yesterday in practice, you honked your horn at us. Was that easy?
Well, you see, the trouble is, on the straights, I'm doing a bit of Sunday driving, really. So I have time to look around and wave at my friends. It was very nice to see you. You weren't working at the time, were you?
When's the programme coming back?
We hope it's coming back in January. In fact, we are putting together a few programmes beforehand so that we get a good start.
They're about to start the front of the way, and a very good start by John Smith. He's absolutely left his stand in front of the road. Made a bad start there, but Sparks is in second place. Little Opal coming up very quickly indeed to somebody on the grass, but it's all okay, and this is going to be murder down at Mountjoy. It should be Smith, possibly Sparks in second place, but what a traffic jam. John Smith takes back very closely. Blanco Root also in contention. And then is it Eddie Regan? No, I think he's in fourth place. It's Coulter in fourth place. Then Eddie Regan in fifth. And then Bob Montgomery right behind him. And there is Russell Connell, but cheekily. Larry Mooney, Russell Connell's car sounding very sick indeed. Larry Mooney cheekily attempting to go past the BMW. So, still Smith, but he has got a fight on his hands because Sparks is going to really give him Sparks. They're very, very close indeed, Mountjoy. The order hasn't changed, though. Round the stream, round Mountjoy, I think Larry Mooney may have gone past the BMW. So Mooney certainly leading the 1,600 cars at the moment, but of course the class is up to 2,000. So the leaders should be back with us shortly, and here they come. That's Sparks, and it's very close. Smith is up into second place. Smith in second place, very close behind them. And Coulter challenging all road as they come up the straight. So it's Phil Sparks, down by 53, 33. Then beside each other, 69 is Stanley Coulter. Then Eddie Regan, a bit of a gap to Eddie Regan, and then another little guy, great little guy, Larry Mooney, leading the other Opals of Bob Montgomery. A backmarker there, Russell Connell in the very sick BMW, just not going right at all. Russell Connell, who should be right up in there amongst the leaders. And we're straining our eyes down towards that corner now for the last time, and this absolute fight stop. There's Phil Sparks. He's okay. He's got the headlights on. In second place is Franco Rook at the moment. That's the back marker, I think, in the way. It's a quick back marker, and it is. Yes, a back marker in the way. No, in fact, it's John Smith. A whole lot of back markers. Sorry, it's John Smith, then Coulter, and then O'Rourke. A O'Rourke dropped right back in that. So O'Rourke drops to fourth place. Regan is fifth.
Went very well. Trouble in the warm-up lap. I think a wire must have come out or slipped off a distributor. The car started to miss and the rev counter stopped working, but seemed to keep going all right anyway after that.
Any embarrassing moments in the race?
Well, John Smith and I touched at one point, but apart from that, it wasn't too bad.
How much experience have you got of riding the park?
I haven't. I've been racing for about 3 or 4 years now. This is about my third year here. Last year, I was driving a Commodore, and I broke the gearbox. I was leading on about the 5th lap, and the gearbox broke, so I had to make up for it this year.
Now we can go back to Phoenix Park and the motor racing there, and we join Alan Tyndall.
And lining up here at Phoenix Park for the Dunlop Hawthorne Production Saloon car race. Now, this is something entirely different. In fact, so different that we're having a little bit of problems working it out ourselves. It's for production saloons, which means standard family saloons, very much like you would drive into work in on a Monday morning. But the difference is they are allowed safety equipment. They have full rollover cages. They have fireproofing front and rear, so there's any accident, the driver is pretty safe in one of these. Also, they're allowed to stiffen up the suspension a little bit and the brakes. Otherwise, they're completely standard motor cars. You will also notice that they're a little bit louder than your family saloon. That's because they've got straight-through exhausts. But it's the Dunlop Hawthorne Trophy race for production saloons over 12 laps. You would think that would be simple enough. In fact, it's far from it. It's also a handicap race, but to add further complication, it is a team race. And the first 3 cars in each team, all the same make of car, but we'll explain that as the race goes on. Meanwhile, we go down to the start and Paddy McClintock.
Here we are at the very start of the Hawthorne production saloon car race, and it's very nice to see a young lady taking part. Mary Maloney. Is this your first race, Mary, at the park?
Yes, this is my first year at the park. I have done a few races in Mandela, but it's my first venture into the park.
How do you feel racing against all these men, and dare I say, with a lot of experience?
Well, women have to show some faith in this venture of motorsport, but it's just sport and try it like the men.
Of course, you're quite well known on the rally circuits. Would you like to tell us from a lady's point of view what the difference between rallying, shall we say, and circuit racing like at the Phoenix Park here?
Well, rallying is much more detailed and it takes up an awful lot more time. Racing, you have maybe the one race during the day and that's it. In my opinion, rallying is a bit more exciting because you're more attached to it, but racing is totally different and perhaps exciting again, but rallying I think is more exciting.
How do you feel just at the start of the race?
Well, I suppose a little bit nervous. It's been my first time here, but sure, we have to get over those when we cross the starting line.
Mary, the very best of luck, and back to Alan at the commentary position.
Thank you.
Well, that's the scene, an amazing scene, and an absolutely vast number of cars and great different varieties of motor cars. As I say, there are 3 cars in each team. They're all the same make, yet not necessarily the same model. For example, we could have 2 Volkswagen Golfs and a Passat, but generally speaking, the vast majority of cars here are Fiats and Volkswagens, and indeed a great Opel entry, of which Mary Maloney is one of them. But Paddy has now got another interview for us, so back to the pits.
Well, we've just been speaking to Mary Maloney, who's driving an Opel, and I mentioned some of the experienced old hands, and also driving an Opel is Frank O'Rourke. Frank, how many years have you been taking part in the park?
I think it's probably the 11th year, Paddy, in the park.
How did you fare out in practice? How is your time compared to everyone else on the starting grid here?
Slightly down in practice, about 2 seconds on the scratch people. I had a slight problem, and I hope it'll have solved it, like, you know. So I'll have to make up the difference.
Frank, what does an experienced guy like you feel at the start of any motor race?
Well, this race is a bit different, so there's a bit more of a delay, but by now I don't really mind, but it's just the delay seems to get on your nerves slightly, you know.
This is a slightly unusual start. Would you explain for us what a Le Mans start is?
Well, the cars will be placed on one side of the road, and in this case the drivers will be in the cars, and your helper or mechanic will run across to you with the key to the car when he gets a signal from the starter, and hand you the key, and you take off then as quick as you can. I
wouldn't like to think that the race could be won and lost in the hands of your mechanic.
Well, it's possibly it can be, but we'll give him 2 spare keys anyway. I hope if he drops one, he has another.
Frank, we'll be looking out for you and your teammate, Mary Maloney, and the very best of luck.
Thanks, Bob.
Back to Alan.
Frank O'Rourke, then, the leader of the dealer Opel Team Ireland team, which also consists of Bob Montgomery and George Wintram in the Opel Monza. So 2 Opel Kadett GTEs. You can see the runners on the left-hand side of the picture, the cars all lined up on the right, really like Le Mans. Of course, times have changed. The driver can't run across the course because he has to do up his seatbelt. And there's Frank O'Rourke getting in at the last moment, slightly panicky, getting the seatbelt all adjusted and done up. His mechanic will rush across the road, hand him the ignition key. You can see that there's no ignition key in the car there just underneath the steering wheel, and away they'll go. So something very, very different indeed here at Phoenix Park, and I think the man who dreamed up this one must have had a bit of a sense of humor. So other teams to look out for, there are no less than 3 Opel teams. Murray Maloney is along with Eddie Hopkins and Pierce Neville there in the new Opel Kadett front-wheel drive 1300s. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 teams of Fiats, and indeed we've got a very interesting team of Honda cars with no less than Harold and Jerry McGarity in that one. Harold, who won the Grand Prix here at Phoenix Park 2 years ago in a Formula Atlantic, since then has retired, but now coming out for a little bit of fun in his Honda Prelude, a car not very often seen in the south of Ireland. Other cars, we've got a Ford team with Harold Hagen, Robin Steenson and John McCullough, and another very strong Opel team indeed, John Smith, the ex-Formula Atlantic driver, Eddie Regan, who was quickest of all in practice, and Will Alexander in the big Opel Commodore. They're getting ready and it looks like things are going to happen at any moment now. The runners on the left-hand side of the road, the cars on the right. Really, we're going to see something quite unique here in Irish Motorsport. Away they go. The first two go across. It's a handicap race, so there's a little bit of nudging, trying to get that key in, and it seems an enormously long time before they get going, and indeed they still haven't got going. But eventually, the two escorts getting going there. A front-wheel drive Opel is going to be away next, we think. There he goes. It's John Smith. Now one of the Golf GTIs, two cars coming together across the road, and one runner nearly slipping, the other doing a very neat maneuver. And once again it's the Golf GTI and number 4 sneaking out of the picture, Marie Maloney, getting away very quickly then, and a whole gaggle of stuff coming in, including one with the most amazing head there. The Fiats, no, it's the Hondas, Fiats, and number 3, the Opel Monza there of George Windrum, a man who's competed probably in Phoenix Park more than anybody else. There goes another batch, and certainly quite a spectacle, this. Turning out to be very interesting entertainment indeed. Number 7 flashing out of the picture there, Mike Armstrong. We're down at Mountjoy to see George Windrum on the inside there, coming down in his road-going Opel Commodore. Beautiful big motor car that he goes to work in every day. And two cars going very widely across the road, and there's George Windrum. Uncle George, as he's known. He's not a young man, over 21 certainly, still more cars, and this looks like the last batch, and there's the problem, and that's the big Opel Commodore, number 33 there of Will Alexander, getting away, and number 1, and that's Frank O'Rourke, is left on the line dramatically. Frank O'Rourke there on the line. What has happened? He can't get the car started. Oh, agony for the Sexton Trophy leader. The frustration of that motor car. Frank O'Rourke, and he's been pushed off the line now. Is it going to get a push start? And that is certainly one of the hot favourites in the dealer Opel Team Ireland car. Frank O'Rourke, who we saw being interviewed, the garage owner from Wexford, getting going almost a complete lap too late as one of the George Windrum goes through their picture. There's one of the Golf GTIs. It looks like Norman Williamson, and one of the many Opels in the race. And already we're getting interesting little gaggles here, and we'll just have to take it now as a scratch race from now on. Number 1 going through there, Frank O'Rourke, almost a lap down, and going very slowly on the outside, and already being overtaken by number 28, Harold Hagen, the very experienced Autotest Hill Climb driver. Now, Frank O'Rourke's got the thing going and beginning to come back and shoot past the standard little Escort 1600 Sport. And a huge amount of traffic now on the main straight, and it really looks like O'Connell Street gone all wrong, where everybody dicing very late on the brakes. Jerry McGarty, number 27, just going through picture there, following Mike Armstrong, and one of the Honda Preludes in the middle of that bunch. And I think that is Eddie Regan just in the left of picture now. Eddie Regan, who was quickest in practice this morning. And some more of the Escorts, and the multitude of Fiats in this one. Well, David, I don't think, David Kennedy, you must have ever seen a race like this before.
Now, it's going to be quite an amazing mix-up, and for the people that look after the lap chart, who is where, with what, and how quickly they've done it. But what should happen, hopefully, is later on in the race, you'll find out the cars beginning to group up together. That's the reason of this scratch handicap race. The last car got away 96 seconds later than the car that got away first. So at the end of 12 laps, hopefully, we should have a whole gaggle of cars cross the line together. We have car number 2, Bob Montgomery in the Opel.
Bob Montgomery going down through the trees, and we reckon at the moment the car that's leading this one is number 28, Harold Hagen, in the Escort, followed by 29, Robin Steenson in the other Escort Sport. So the Escort Sports are the ones to look out for. All the Fiats coming out of Ratra there. Couple of the Fiats, number 20, and that's in the Fiat Team F, and that's Graham Morris. Very nice shot coming down into Phoenix Bend, and that is one of the Escort Sports, followed by Larry Mooney in the Golf GTI, front-wheel drive, of course, and number 7, Mike Armstrong from Tulla in his Fiat 127. Mooney, the Grange Motors car on the right of your picture there, one of the quicker cars out here. And Eddie Regan, just a last car, really trying there at the back. Eddie Regan, a very experienced driver indeed, who's been racing for many, many years in his Opel Kadett GTE 2-litre car.
And the cars slipping in behind each other again to maximise on the slipstreaming. There's cars just about everywhere. It looks like, in fact, as Alan had said, O'Connell Street at the rush hour. You remember these, oh, very, very close bit of weaving there. 7 and number 21. If you remember that these cars are more or less bog standard, they're allowed free exhaust system to put in rollover cages, and they're only allowed a size or so wider tyres than normal. No full racing tyres. A lovely shot now of the cars going through the back section on the way to Ratra, in between the trees. Car number 7. Been overtaken very quickly again by Bob Montgomery in the Opel, car number 2.
Larry Mooney coming down in the Golf GTI, 1600cc fuel injected. Locking up the back a little bit under braking there. He raced this car regularly all year, and one of the antics of the Fiats. Fiats are great fun in this class. There's so many of them out. They're all very standard motor car, and of course it's pretty cheap racing. That's Jerry McGarity in the front-wheel drive Honda Civic, which took part in the Circuit of Ireland and many other major international rallies. As you can see, what a handful, and the driver's really throwing the saloon cars. Front-wheel drive car then again of Larry Mooney, using all the road. Very neat bit of driving there indeed. There's the course, the Phoenix Park course. The corner that you're watching them come round is the one in the extreme right of your picture, just nearest to the main straight, going on to this huge long main straight, while a very fast Bob Montgomery flashing through the picture there in the Kadett GTE. And once again we see Larry Mooney in the Grange Motors car. Larry is a member of Team E, which is the VW team, and in this team he's got Derek Shorthall and Norman Williams. Now, as you saw, Bob Montgomery making great grounds with car number 2. His team, in fact, are going to be quite far down the leaderboard. As you saw, car number 1, Frank O'Rourke, who was interviewed before the race, get a push start. So I imagine he's either going to have a 10-second or possibly even a 1-minute penalty, which will drop their team right out of contention. But meanwhile, Bob Montgomery making tremendous strides, hoping to make up some of the ground that Frank O'Rourke has lost. One of the escorts there, the escort team are doing extremely well. Those will be some of the leaders there. Steenson, just going to the left of your picture, was lying in second place. And number 29 there, so the escorts team-wise probably leading this at the moment. George Windrum coming up the straight now in the Monza, and another one of the Opel Cadets, probably Maria Maloney. There's the front-wheel drive Cadet going round Mountjoy and coming down into braking distance now, and this becomes really quite a problem in standard saloons when you put them under punishment. The GTI on the right and 29 just sneaking through on the left. Robin Steenson in the escort there, who comes from Cookstown, and his business is toys and undertaking, so I suppose you could say that he gets both ends of the market. The GTI of Norman Williamson pulling away a little bit on the long back straight. These cars seem to be amazingly quite equally matched, in fact, as we saw them brake side by side down to Mountjoy corner. But he just seemed to have the advantage here on this section of straight. I don't know whether the other car is better under braking or so. We'll see again at the next corner. Car number 28, the leader, Harold Hagan. Again from Cookstown, and races this car regularly in the escort races, which are a single make class of racing. A 1600 escort sport, pretty standard, that he built up himself. And talking about motorsport, Harold Hagan has literally done it all. Hill climbs, sprints, auto tests, has represented Northern Ireland in many auto test championships. And at the moment, the two escorts, number 28 and 29, are leading this handicap race at the moment. So there's Harold Hagan leading at the moment as they come round Phoenix and up the straight. The Golf GTI in the background there, Norman Williams. Again, he's in the garage business and comes from Dublin and has raced quite a lot in production saloons, had an RS2000 out before. But George Windrum, really one of the legends of Irish motorsport, a very generous man. Not only does he race himself, but he helps many up-and-coming young drivers to do the same. And indeed, it was one of his drivers, Phil Sparks, who won the production saloon car race here at Phoenix Park last year. having a real go. Harold Hagen down the inside there, weaving his way amongst the traffic, and it's interesting to note that he's managing to stay ahead of the Golf GTI there.
Yeah, quite surprisingly, actually. One would have expected the Golf GTIs to be quicker, but still, he hasn't made any great gains from the GTI. It's still hanging on quite close. Harold, as you said, of course, has a lot of experience in driving exceptionally well. His car seems to be stopping particularly well under braking and handling it very nicely. He's not getting the car crossed up or sliding up onto the dirt or wasting any time. Harold is out for a win on this one, obviously.
Second place man then in picture at the moment, Robin Steenson, the Escort Sport, and one of the fast cars, the Monza of George Windham, streaking past them there on the straight, but he probably has to do another lap in handicap. George Windham then, number 3 in the team with Frank O'Rourke and Bob Montgomery. George, who runs a sweet wholesale business in Belfast, was actually born in Tipperary town. As they come down into Phoenix. Behind him, number 5, Eddie Hopkins in his front-wheel drive Opel Kadett 1300. And then the Steenson, the second-place man, pulling out of the slipstream of the Opel and up the straight. And of course, the whole idea of a handicap race is that after 12 laps, and exactly half distance now, they should all arrive at Phoenix Monument together and come up the straight, about 36 cars together. That'll be a sight to see.
Most certainly will, and if it does happen, in fact, I think we shall actually have no finishers at all. Down to Mountjoy corner, a tight right-hander. These Saloon cars will be taking this in second gear. Nice bit of out-braking manoeuvre there.
That was John Smith going on the inside. John Smith, who has been doing all the Sexton rounds, all the hill climbs and races this year. Really having a go at the Sexton Trophy, the overall competition for Irish motorsport. Used to also do Formula Atlantic. So number 31, John Smith, coming through the trees. He's got 3 Opels that he's been racing, a Commodore, which his mechanic Will Alexander is out on in this race, that Opel, and indeed another Opel GTE. There's the second place man, Steenson, Robin Steenson, the Escort Sport.
So far we've got Eddie Regan, car number 32, has set fastest lap in 1 minute 41.6. In fact, his pole position time, he was quickest overall, was 1 minute 41.8. So he's quickly got down to the same time that he did in official practice.
And one of the Fiats steaming very badly in the pits there, obviously overheating rather badly, can't see the number, but high drama in the pits, and the driver offering a cloth. I think it's going to need more than a cloth as he gets out of it. And the leaderboard now beginning to change. We've got number 3, George Windham, coming up very quickly up through the field, now up into 3rd place. And we have a new leader now, number 18, Norman Williamson, in the red Golf GTI. Not this one, that's Larry Mooney.
Larry, a great stalwart of Irish motorsport. Grange Motors just flashed by out of our picture. Larry is involved in all forms of motorsport, from helping young drivers to running in saloon cars and rallying and hill climbing. Larry has just about done it all.
And it was Michael Sheenan who was in all that hot and bother in the pits there, the car overheating badly. The 24-year-old Dublin mechanic there, who looked in a spot of bother. Number 2 going through picture, Bob Montgomery on the inside. And there, in the pits, the fastest man in practice, Eddie Regan, number 32. What a disappointment for the Dublin driver. The Opel Kadett GTE 2-litre. Now, of course, this means that he's got to finish the race if his team is going to be in with a chance. So Eddie Regan has got to get out there again somehow. John Smith and Will Alexander, the 2 other members of the team, will not be able to qualify if Eddie cannot get that car going again. There's one of the Honda Preludes just coming through Phoenix in the background, and you can see the string of cars, and the very last one of those was Norman Williamson, number 18, coming up the straight now, right in the middle of your picture at the back, the Golf GTI, the red Golf GTI.
And now we see the cars begin to gather up and close up together.
Meanwhile, the Fiat Brigade break for Monument. Sorry, David. of Fiats in many different colours, accelerating out of Monument and up around this long, long right-hander. There's the Honda Prelude trying to pick out the number. I think it's 28, and that's Harold Hagen. Harold Hagen being overtaken on the inside by another one of the Park veterans, Des Cullen, and he's, like George Wyndham, have been round this course so many times over the years.
We've just had news from the pits that Eddie Regan made a pit stop because he had clutch problems, so that'll have him out of the race and out of the race for good.
30 John McCullough, the third member of the Escort team in the Escort 1600 Sport, breaking very late indeed for Ratra there. And the leader now, we make out to be number 18 Norman Williamson, the Golf GTA. So the Escort Sports drop back a little bit. Again, a Fiat under heavy braking there, flashing through the picture. And here is the traffic jam. George Wyndham there, just leading it out. Number 28, the early leader, Harold Hagen, who is still in third place. The Fiat's heeling over, and somebody doing a very daring do inside there. There's Norman Williamson, the leader, going through the picture, the red one. Norman Williams, quite an experienced driver, races regularly at Modelo and Production Saloon car races, but the Golf GTI is new to him. George Wyndham in second place, and an enormous gaggle of motor cars on the back straight, a really crowded scene.
Now, as our scratch makers, the people that have made up the race list, have really seemed to have done their figures right, as all the cars are building up together. So I think, as Alan said, at the end of the race, at 12 laps, we'll have the whole lot. There's our race leader, number 18, Norman Williams, coming from Dundrum, the VW Golf GTI.
The leader then going past one of the Fiats, up through the trees, race leader Norman Williams. Right up through the 5-speed box on the Golf GTI, probably touching over 100 miles an hour in a standard production saloon. Pretty amazing.
Quite quick speeds to bring the cars down to about a 10-15 miles an hour for Rapture Corner. Really making great pace here as you see him just fly past the Fiat in the background. Driving very, very well, no problems at all.
Down into first, and then trying to get the power down on the ground, not wanting to hit the curb at the outside there. Up into second, then up into third gear. You can see he's concentrating the head very slightly forward there, coming up to lap another one of the Fiats. He was got on by Phoenix as he heads off into the wooded area. The next shot we'll get will be just coming into Phoenix there, and he's been held up slightly by that Fiat number 36, is it? Franco Mira, who was out in the Volkswagen race. Williams diving over to the right, accelerating out of the corner, and Wyndham right behind him in second place. George Wyndham, the big silver car in the Opel Monza. And it's really all got very close and hot and heavy. Harold Hagen is still in third place. But another one of the Golfs, Derek Shortall, coming up there too. There's first and second on the left-hand side of your screen. Williams in the Golf and George Wyndham, who surely must take him on this lap, and they're on the 10th lap of a 12-lap race.
2 laps to go. He's got a small, reasonable amount of distance to make up if he's to get the lead, but at the rate he's going, it is quite possible that he could win this race. Much more powerful car, and we have some of the lost their brakes. He's gone straight on at Mountjoy. Fortunately, there's a run-off area there, so no damage will have been caused.
That's Derek Shortall going through in his Golf. He'd bad luck in practice when 2 of his 5 gears went. Exhaust trailing the ground underneath the car there. And again, Williams now trying to hold off George Wyndham there, coming down into Ratcher, leaving his braking extremely late. Can he get round?
I think George, after the next corner, which is Phoenix Corner, which is quite a tight right-hander, he'll make his move on the straight on the way down to Mountjoy Corner.
The Golf a little bit niftier out of the hairpin there, but the Monza, when it gets really steamed up, has a definite power advantage on the straights. Coming into Monument, here they come, first and second. Williams really trying, banging on the brakes there as the car was a little bit crooked.
now. This
and
is
using not all the road there, coming out onto the straight, and this is surely where George Windham should go through.
There can't be a problem here for him now. He's not even slipstreaming. He is now going to take the lead. Not this white car, but the red car on the left of your screen. The car ahead of us is a back marker. George Windham will be taking the lead.
One of the Escort Sports in the way, and they seem to be about neck and neck, but the Monza definitely having the power advantage. And is it as good on the brakes as the Golf GTI? They will be hitting the braking distance. They're well into the braking distance now. And the Escort nearly taking the nose off the big Monza as it goes round. Number 30 there being a bit cheeky, John McCullough, in that manoeuvre, making it all the botheration of going past him once again, but no problem.
Race leader, as you see on your screen, George Windham, Opel Monza. Probably the most powerful car in this race, but quite a handful for the very tight right-handed corners, which all the corners, we've got 3 tight right-handed corners in this track. And you can see the distance, how much he can be closed up on by the other car, and in particular the back marker that they just overtook just simply went right around the outside of the corner.
Larry Mooney doing a bit of traffic cleaning up there around the back. And one of the Escorts coming down, one of the Opels, in fact, coming down into Ratra. And it really requires a lot of concentration to break down from well over the ton down into about 25, maybe even 20 miles an hour in a production saloon. There's first and second on the screen. George Windham and John Williams. And the checkered flag, waiting for George Windham. Up he comes, and yet another victory at Phoenix Park for the old man, and he wouldn't mind being described as that. Williams is second. In third place is going to be number 30, John McCullough, and in fourth, number 2, Bob Montgomery. But it's going to take quite a while to work out this team handicap business.
Yes, it's quite a few problems there with several cars that made the pit stops, and here we have a good shot of George Windham, actually, as Paul calls him, Uncle George Windham. A very, very nice drive, quite a heavy, and here we have the unofficial team result, which was Frank O'Rourke, Bob Montgomery and George Windham. That was dealer Opel Team A.
Well, that seems quite likely, because Windham won it and Bob Montgomery in car number 2. He was well in there also. Frank O'Rourke, of course, had a miserable outing. And we're just trying to check the lap charts for that. Other teams that could have done well would have been the Escort team. They were fairly well spaced out. They had a car in 3rd place and 5th place, and they may well also be in with a big chance. There are 30 points for 1st place, 29 for 2nd, and so it goes right down the list. So there's George Windham with the helmet off, having really enjoyed himself there, the big Opel, and obviously worked pretty hard at it too.
There he is, taking his time now, taking it back to pitch. Not a young man, as you can say, but still breathing heavy after that 12 laps of exertion.
And I think he would need